To see ya.
I just say to
Thanks. Hi, Dorothy.
Hi, hi, Erin.
hi everyone.
Amanda, sorry, I was on a call that I had to.
No, it's fine. Okay, we are live. Hello everyone. You are watching our June brown bag, handling tricky and unexpected situations with diabetes. If you are unfamiliar with DPAC, which I doubt many of you are at this point, we ensure quality of and access to care, medications, and devices for patients living with diabetes, and we educate, inspire, and empower patient advocates as well as lawmakers toward meaningful action on diabetes. And our socials are there at the bottom. Feel free to take a look at those during our webinar. So today we have three featured speakers. Bridget Elder. Bridget has 31 years of experience in healthcare, education and training, clinical informatics, and hospital inpatient management. She is a consultant for several hospitals nationwide, a local brick and mortar online retail business owner, board member, mental health and diabetes advocate, friend, sister, mother, and wife, and recently a restaurant owner, as I've heard.
Wow.
Um, Erin Callahan is the Chief Operating Officer at the Diabetes Leadership Council and the Diabetes Patient Advocacy Coalition, and shares a passion for the mission to ensure quality of and access to care, medications, and devices for people living with diabetes. And she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in 1986 and has advocated for herself and others as long as she can remember. Lastly, we have Dorothy. Dorothy has had type 1 diabetes for 60 years and has been on an insulin pump since 1983. She was in the first and second clinical trial studies for the first run sensor by MiniMed in the 90s. Professionally, she has been in medical record administration since 1979 and now codes medical records for a large hospital firm. She also volunteers at several organizations regularly, and since the LA fires, she has been volunteering at her local free farmers market, donating toiletries and clothes to fire victims. Okay, to start us off, can each of you briefly introduce yourself and share your connection to diabetes? We'd also love to hear a bit about your tricky or unexpected situation that you've navigated and what brings you to this conversation today.
Sure, I'll start. Hi, you did a great job of introducing me. I was wondering where you were going to pull all that information from, Amanda, but I'm still
I
Erin
found it.
Callahan. Hi, everybody. You have the luxury of knowing that it's on our website. I'm Erin Callahan. In addition to what our website and Amanda say about me, I love advocating for this community. I've lived with type 1 diabetes since 1986. We're going to get into this throughout this conversation, but more recently, I have been facing some of the challenges associated with complications. And one thing I do want to give a little plug to on this call and on this platform is the acceptance of developing complications. After living with type 1 diabetes for almost 39 years now, it's not something to be afraid of or to step away from or to use a therapy word, other people about. There's a lot of conversation around well-managed diabetes and well-controlled diabetes. We can't use that word anymore. Avoiding complications and avoiding, any sort of problems or ongoing issues as a result of that management and control. But it's actually just a part of life, and it's okay. And I, as a person who lives with retinopathy and who faced some vascular issues last year, and we'll talk about those, I'm here to tell you that it's okay to have like an in the light conversation about living with complications, because many, if not all of us, will face some sort of complication as a result of living very successfully with diabetes. So we're here to do the best we can, and I believe that everybody is doing that. I'm gonna pass it to Dorothy.
Okay, hi.
I'll help.
I'm Dorothy. I've had diabetes since
That's
1965.
great.
It was in the dark ages where people thought I had leprosy and they could catch it. And I took one shot a day for 21 years because I was going to die anyway, so who cared? And then home blood testing came out. And I didn't believe it half the time. I kept trying different fingers, I kept trying different things, that kind of thing. And then I went, oh my God, I made it to adulthood. I think I better start paying attention. I did have cataracts since I was 13, but I was too vain to go stand in line with the old people. So I didn't take care of them. I didn't get them out. They grew and grew and grew. I think I was 44 when I was a director of medical records for City of Hope, and I was taking 80% of my work home and reading it under a 200-watt light bulb with magnifying glass. And I thought, you fool, go get your cataracts out. So when I got my cataracts out, that's when they noticed the retinopathy. Um, I went on a pump in 1983 because I saw, oh, I'm an adult, and people are living now longer with diabetes. So I used to ride my bike to USC, even as a little kid, and go to the medical library and read everything that I knew about diabetes. I found an article about a insulin pump. So I called my doctor. My doctor's like, "Are you going to kill yourself?" Because he knew I wouldn't take more than one shot a day. I'm like, "I'm too busy with life. I'm going to take one shot a day and forget I have diabetes." And because my mom taught me to just get out there and go. And I've ridden my bike from Canada to Mexico and to Wyoming, from Southern California. Um, and at that time, it was really easy because I guess I was always so high, I rarely went low. If I went low, I treated and we kept riding. And we'd ride 100 miles a day, no problem. And then when I went on the pump, it was like culture shock. I can't move without my blood sugar dropping. And so I was diagnosed brittle. I am still brittle. I am still dealing with it. And I take between 14 and 18 units total daily dose. So the calculations on that are very, very minute. I have participated in support groups and given other people hope, but I haven't been in it professionally because I know there's a lot of diabetics out there that don't really care, and I just don't have patience for them because you've got to be an advocate for yourself and fight to stay alive and to stay healthy. In January, I do have complications. I have T1D, CKD, PKD, the retinopathy, and PMA. PMA is positive mental attitude. When it comes to my diabetes, I have a positive mental attitude. I'm very proactive. I'm on a insulin pump and sensor, and I love it because now, for the first time, before the fires, I could sleep all night. Now I can't sleep because there's just too many complications in my life other than diabetes. In January 8th, I lost 40 years of my home in the Altadena Eaton fire, and along with 9,000 other community members. So in a nutshell, that's the story about me.
Thank you, Dorothy. And we'll definitely get into that soon. Just quickly, I wanted to let Bridget introduce herself before we get into the bulk of our webinar today.
Sure. Thanks, Dorothy. Thanks, Aaron. Hello, everyone. My name is Bridget Elder, and I have a different perspective or a different story from my two co-hosts that I'm with. I do not have diabetes, but I come from a family history of watching my grandparents and my father-in-law actually suffer with complications of diabetes. And I also have been, like Amanda announced, a nurse for over 3 decades. I don't know which sounds better, 3 decades or 30 plus years. So there you go. And have taken care of tons and tons of patients with diabetes and complications of diabetes. Have also been an educator who taught nurses how to take care of patients with diabetes. And then things changed, and my sister, who's always had diabetes for several years, started declining. Things started happening, and we moved back to Alabama. And it got me to lean in closer to her care and I had a whole different perspective of patients, education, and healthcare from a whole different set of lenses. And hopefully, I could share some things today that'll give everyone some different perspectives as a primary caregiver, as a family member, trying to navigate this complicated life.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah, thanks.
Thank you all for being here. I'd like to spotlight each person's story individually. So I'm going to start with Erin. When preparing for surgery, how did you approach informing your medical team about your diabetes devices and needs? And what are some key things that you made sure they understood in advance?
Well, my story is probably not totally unique, but the reason that I have had to have so many of these conversations in the last year is I broke my ankle at a Taylor Swift dance party that my cousin Kate hosted with all of my cousins. I feel like somewhere along the way, Taylor should find out about this. So, like, Tay Tay, if you're listening, we got something to talk about. Um, and I fell in socks on a hardwood floor, and I knew something was wrong right away. I came up and I went right back down. And we had a couple of Taylor Swift themed cocktails as well. So we called an ambulance and I got to the hospital. I was very much in shock. I didn't really know what was happening. I was in so much pain in my foot. They did x-rays right away. And I told them I have diabetes, I have diabetes, I have type 1 diabetes. And they understood that in the emergency room, no problem. That wasn't the acute issue that we were working with. So I can't really speak to that setting, but I had surgery about a week later. I had broken my ankle in 3 places, and I needed to have surgery right away to get everything reset and pins put in and all sorts of hardware put in my leg. And so I had to go to pre-op 2 days later. And I told them that I have type 1 diabetes, that I have a pump, that I have a CGM, and that I want to keep my devices on me. And I've heard stories, and I've seen them on the internet where you find all of your stories, right? That people have been told that they can't use their devices, they have to take them off. And I am here to tell you that you need to just keep telling them exactly what you are going to do. And don't take no for an answer. And if you do get a no, call somebody else. And if you get a no from them, call me and I'll come in and fight for you. I mean that very sincerely, actually.
Yes.
So when I went to my pre-op, I said, listen, I'm going to self-manage. I'm going to keep my CGM on. I'm going to keep my pump on. Is your team familiar with these devices? And I had to take on the role of the teacher and the educator in that case. Instead of saying, can I do this? I told them, I'm going to do this and I'm going to help you if you don't know how. So I think that that shifted the conversation a little bit in that I wasn't in a position to say, "Oh, okay, you tell me what to do." I took on the heavier role of authority because I have the authority over my diabetes, over my body, over my own care, and they worked really well with me. I have to give a huge shout out to my team at Rush University Medical Center in Chicago and Midwest Orthopedics at Rush. They were phenomenal. They helped me through what I should eat and drink before. I had to take nothing by mouth as of midnight the night before. They helped me work on my basal rates and to adjust those, which of course I could do that by myself. But I said, in the event that I do have a low, what am I supposed to do? I'm not rescheduling the surgery. You tell me how I can work through it. And they said, well, you can put honey on your gums, you can drink sips of apple juice at a time. The concern is not that you are starving when you go into surgery. The concern is that you have nothing in your stomach in case you aspirate or something happens, or that they need to intubate you. That is usually not the initial case when you go into surgery. Intubation is sort of a last resort, but they want to make sure that those pathways to your stomach and to your systems are clear if they do have to do that. So I found that teams will very much work with you if you show them that you have authority and autonomy over your own body and over what's happening. My experience there was very good. Um, I'm going to go on with the rest of it quickly, but I ended up having to have another surgery on my ankle because my bones turned to mush. And apparently that's a very technical term. But they assumed, and this is where it gets wonky, they assumed that I have neuropathy, because I actually had been walking around on 5 newly broken bones in my foot because my ankle never fused together as it should have, and I was complaining of being in pain. So I went back for an x-ray and they said your bones aren't working. My all the pins in my legs looked like this because my bones were not setting properly. And because my bones weren't holding up my body weight, it had pushed that pressure to my foot and my bones in my foot had broken. We're going to talk about the fact that I walked around Universal Studios with my dear friend Julie, who also has type 1 for about 10 miles, like a week before this x-ray, which was wild. Um, but immediately when they said that I have this bone issue, they suggested a condition called Charcot arthropathy, which is a complication. And it's typically what happens when people with diabetes ultimately face limb loss. Your you develop Charcot, um, and your bones will disintegrate. And because you can't feel them, you can't feel the infection, and they're not setting properly, the only option is amputation. So on that day, about 6 months after my first surgery, my doctor came in and said, "We're in limb salvage." And I was terrified. I've never been in a setting where I was so scared in my life, but I don't have a choice but to move forward. And so you have to kind of summon all the strength that you have and all the advocacy that you've ever done for yourself to say, what do I do? That was my second question. My first question, though, is what have I done? And
Oh,
I immediately went to blame. And how could I have avoided this? And when did I screw it up? And was it, those nights in college where I was drinking too much? Was it the times in high school where I was driving through donuts and hiding it from my parents? Eh, Which one did it? And Dorothy, I see you smiling because I think we can all
yeah,
probably relate to this.
I've been there.
Yeah, exactly. And that's so unfortunate because it's this weight we don't know exists. But we're human too, right? And we have heads and hearts and we have volition and we can make our own decisions. And we sometimes have to live with the consequences. I am happy to report that after a third surgery in October of last year, and the follow-up from that, I was able to keep my leg. My bones have healed properly, and I'm still in some pain. I had to take out about an inch and a half of mush from my leg, so one of them is an inch and a half shorter than the other. I have to get all of my shoes resoled, which looks kind of funky. But I'm here to tell the tale. And one of the times when I was in the hospital, I saw that they had taken my insulin because you're not allowed to have your own prescriptions in the
Oh,
hospital. And they went into my bag where I had told them that I had Tylenol and a couple of other OTC type of products. When I went to change my pump while I was inpatient in the ICU last July, I had no pump supplies or insulin in there. And I also hadn't seen a nurse come in. So I lost my mind. And that was another time where I had to advocate for myself. I had told them that I was going to be fully self-sufficient. I had told them that I was going to manage my own pump, my own CGM, my own blood sugar. They were wonderful with that. But some technician came in and took the insulin because I wasn't supposed to have it. And ultimately, I got it back, but it was not before a few choice words and a call to my mom for emotional support.
That's amazing. And I know I speak for everyone and say they were really relieved to hear that it worked out in the end, despite the 1.5 inches on your other leg that you
Thank
no
you.
longer have.
Yeah, I walk in circles.
But that is so terrible to like, and you're in the operating room and you go into your bag and basically you've been robbed. That's
Yeah.
of the thing that is supposed to keep you alive. That is traumatic at best. I'm so sorry that that happened to you.
Not your fault. And I think I think one thing that, once my blood pressure came down, everybody was doing the best that they could. Um, but I immediately went to blame and I immediately went to, I shouldn't have told them to look in there. I should have said, you left my insulin in here, right? And the fact is, I shouldn't have had to say that. But here we are, not only living with diabetes and the challenges that we face with that every day, but also having to advocate for things in very unusual situations that others just don't have to deal with. So, like, my heart is with this entire community through all of the things and through all of the compounded things that come with it, too.
Yeah. Someone in the Q&A just said my endocrinology informed the staff that under no circumstances are they to remove my pump. That's a
I
good
love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
So shifting a little bit now to Bridget, I wanted to ask your sister's journey through a kidney transplant while living with diabetes is such a powerful example of navigating overlapping health challenges. What were some of the most unexpected parts of that process, and how did diabetes care factor into recovery? And as a sub question, I'd also like to ask, were there moments where you had to advocate for her or on behalf of her in the hospital or following her surgery?
Absolutely. Thanks, Amanda. Aaron, that's so interesting. We could probably sit here for hours talking about healthcare professionals and the things they do because of policies and procedures. And nurses really don't want to do those things, but they're held to such a, and you understand that. But it just goes to the heart of when the policies and processes are created for the safety of patients, we somehow forget their mental sanity that's attached to that. We'll talk about that later too with the
Oh,
mental illness. But with my sister, the trickiest thing was that finding out that she didn't even realize she was in kidney failure and was going to probably be on dialysis or need a kidney transplant. Why is that, you ask? Because every single visit she attended, her primary physician or her endocrinologist just kept saying, your kidney, your GFR is this, and your creatinine is this. It's not getting any better. What does that mean to a layperson? Absolutely nothing. She was so in the mode of taking care of so many other people. And I know what you're saying, Aaron, when you talked about you start to blame yourself. She was so in the mode of taking care of other people that she simply just said, well, I guess it's okay. Let me keep living because I got to take care of some other people. She's a huge community advocate, feeds the homeless, and does all sorts of things for her community. So in the meantime, her kidneys are shutting down, her blood sugars are getting worse, and she's just going to these visits, and everybody's just keep saying, "You're getting worse. Things are pretty, you're getting worse." Anyway, so she was now faced with a kidney transplant, and that whole process of just the education part of it was really nice. But I'll go back to simple things like now we're accepting the fact that we're going to have a kidney transplant. The whole process of getting the letters and getting listed to be on a kidney transplant list was something on top of all of the management of her diabetes and her supplies. And let's not even get into insurance coverage. Now we're talking about a person who is not eligible for Medicare, so she's on Medicaid. So now we have limited doctor's visits that Medicaid will only pay for so many visits. And when you're a person that have complications, as you all know, that's not going to work. So now we're faced with, okay, who's going to pay for this kidney transplant? How are you going to manage that? And if you don't get it, now you're going to die. It made lots of things come to the surface when people send you resources and say, well, since she's underinsured or uninsured, here's a list of resources that you can call and see if they will help you to get that kidney transplant paid for, or see if they'll help you to get that insulin paid for, or see if they will help you to get that sensor paid for. So that's a whole nother conversation. However, when I think back on the whole gamut of things, advocating for her even before she had surgery was the several trips to the emergency room. And the ultimate goal of treating a person with elevated blood sugars, low kidney function is dialysis. That's all they want to know. Oh, you got to put you on dialysis. And if you don't, you're going to die. And my sister was she was just adamant that she did not want to do that because she watched her father suffer through dialysis and eventually pass away from complications of the problems that occur at these dialysis centers that you all know are not really managed well or overlooked well. The patients are basically taking care of themselves. So she was like, no, 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 no dialysis. However, professionals, the clinicians there in every hospital would say, but if you don't do this dialysis, you're going to die. I would have to advocate for her and say, surely there is something else besides dialysis. And once you squeeze their necks hard enough, and like you said, Aaron, say no often enough and say what you're not going to do is put her on a dialysis machine, then you find out, oh, we do have one protocol that we could probably try that will get her blood sugars lowered, that will decrease her creatinine, and it might help with her kidney function. We'll see, but we don't promise anything. And so advocating for things besides what the patient or what the hospital or the professionals say you have to have, like they told you, you cannot have this. It's really sad that a patient, if she didn't have family members, Erin, I'm glad that you were able to advocate for yourself. My sister didn't know what to say. So my biggest thing in this whole advocacy through DPAC is learning how to be a voice for the voiceless because she's sitting there looking at potentially dying. So she has no energy and no mental fortitude to be able to even say whatever. I don't have any strength to argue with these people. They're telling me this. So you have to have a person who cares for you and who is right there with you, making notations, who can say, no, what's not going to happen is you're not going to do this. So keeping lots of notes because I'm a nurse, that was just a natural inclination to keep lots of notes because otherwise mistakes would have been made. She would not have even gotten to the kidney transplant had I not advocated for all the mistakes that were made. Oh, sorry, she's not on the list yet because you all still need a CT scan and she still needs a pap smear. For a kidney transplant, we already had that last year. No, we don't have that yet. Yes, we do. Here's when I sent it. Here's the date that she had it. So documentation as a nurse, I know it kind of sounds weird. People will say, well, I don't want to write all that stuff down. You will have to. You will have to because the person, your family member, yourself may not be capable to keep up with all that documentation. So advocating for them when mistakes are being made and no one else is there to say, yeah, she's already done that. I don't think we need to repeat that. So it's been a whole whirlwind as far as advocating for. And then we can get into this a whole lot later, but advocating for her after the surgery, we thought, yay, she has a kidney now. She's all good. Life is grand. Take her home and she can't urinate because of a catheter. And then now you have the fuss. And so it's lots of things that I think clinicians, especially, I'm not downing clinicians, but there's a huge audience that we fail to capture in this education. We're so focused on the patients that they need to know everything, or people with diabetes, that I think as a nurse, I have to be completely transparent and say, we have missed a whole segment of information that we are potentially harming patients with diabetes because we fail to look at things from their perspective. And hopefully after us, people becoming involved with DPAC will learn exactly how important it is to be an advocate for the people you love and the people you take care of for a living.
Yeah,
Bridget,
Bridget, oh, sorry, Erin, go ahead.
I think I just want to touch on one thing that you said, is that I noticed that you corrected from saying patients to people with diabetes a couple of times. And I think the point of using human-centered language and person-centered language is that we don't forget that we are humans with heads and hearts, but simply changing the words isn't enough. And I think that a lot of people get really caught up on the words and not so much on the intent. And I would love to see a little bit of a focus shift to what's the intent behind changing the words. It's not about getting it right on a test. It's about truly understanding who it is that we're treating and all of the elements that go into that person.
Mm, that's really good. That's really good. And that's not really focused on as far as in education. I can attest
Yeah.
because I was an educator. I'm a nurse educator.
Yeah.
We did not focus. There's so many other things that you're trying to aim at, but this conversation has to be had because if we're going to change the trajectory of people's lives, we have to start looking at those details and how it impacts their mental well-being while they're navigating this very treacherous journey.
Yeah.
Bridget, you wear so many hats, like as a provider, as an advocate, as a in your bio, like a sister, wife, friend, like you really do. And your sister, I'm really glad that you were able to be there for your sister and advocate for her. And it's sad that at so many points in the process that you had so many roadblocks that you had to that she wasn't able to advocate for herself and you had to step in. So I'm glad, but I'm also, it's unfortunate that any of that happened, of course. Um,
Absolutely.
Dorothy, losing your home in the wildfires is a devastating experience, and a unique one. How did you manage your diabetes in the immediate aftermath, when it came to insulin, supplies, access to care, and community support? And what helped you get through those first days? I know you mentioned earlier in the call that the shock is over, but you're still dealing with the aftermath. And is there anything that continues to provide you with assistance and support now?
Um, I left, I have been through fires before, but they've always gone over the hill.
Mhm.
So I watched, I watched the mountain. I don't think I slept for like 90 hours after the fire. I couldn't go to sleep. My diabetes, good luck. My head was filled with disaster. Oh my God, I've got to start all over again. I'm going to be 70 next year. This isn't what I want to do. I wasn't promised tomorrow, and now you took my whole past away from me. Um, I left. I saw that the ridge right before my house was on fire at 2:06. 20 minutes later, it just filled up my whole window. The image did, and we were gone 20 minutes later. Because I had been through fires before, in 1993, we were almost evacuated. And I realized that my diabetic supplies were all over the house. I had things everywhere. And it took me so, and I had little kids at the time. So while they're running around saving their entire life, I'm running around trying to get insulin pump supplies and narrowing them down so I had room in the car because I was like, my kids are going to fill up the car. There's no room for me. I got to have a little box of something, you know. So what I started doing was taking, you know, when you get your pump supplies, it comes in a box. I would put the box on the shelf upright like this, and I would use the supplies as a shelf, but they were in a box so I could easily pull it out if I needed to. And I never thought I would need to. And when I got the second supply and I had a stash, I would put it in back. I put the fresh ones in back so that I would continue to keep using the older ones first. So I had a box for my sensors and my pump supplies. Um, Last year I went on a cruise, so I had a Frio pack. And what I did was when I saw that the fire had gotten to us way too fast, one of the things you have to understand is the winds were doing 80 to 100 miles an hour, which is due to climate change. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And when I saw how fast everything was moving, I went to the kitchen. I took all my insulin out of the boxes because the boxes are bulky, and I wrapped them with the inner instructions, you know, the label thing, and I wrapped them and stuck them in a Ziploc bag and stuck them in the Frio bag. I had like 15 bottles of insulin that I did not want to go to waste. Plus, I had those pen things. I've never used a pen. I went on a pump before pens and all that stuff was invented. So I have all the stuff, but I don't know how to use it. And I'm thinking, okay, I need that. I'll throw that in there too. So I had that in the refrigerator ready to go. Um, when I saw that the fire was coming pretty fast, I had told my husband to take the boxes off the shelf, as well as some photos and some personal bios, and we had them at the front door. And when I saw it hit the last ridge, I went, I think we should put those in the car. So we put it in the car. I left the insulin in the refrigerator because I go, okay, I got to keep it as cold as possible. And I know I'll be gone for a couple days and I'll come back. Um, I forgot my emergency medicine at my bedside in the medicine cabinet, my glucose tabs, my vitamins and minerals, and my other pills. I had just diabetic stuff. That's it. I don't take very many pills, but I do have a hypothyroid and I am on proactive, preventative medicines because I've had diabetes too long. Um, that I had forgotten. Oh well. I left 20 minutes after I saw that the fire filled up my window. And I looked at my pump. I wasn't low, good. I put it in sleep mode. No, I think it was already in sleep mode because it was 2 o'clock in the morning. So I left at 2:40 a.m. So the whole focus was don't hit a tree, don't hit a power line, and these embers that were just flying past us. I was like, don't catch my car on fire. I can't take my dog and all my medical supplies under my arms and run. So I was just praying that I wouldn't, as I was driving 4 miles through this mess, that I wasn't going to have to get out and run like I see people on TV. I was alone in the car. My husband was in front of me in the other car, and I had my dog. That dog did not start whining and yelling for an hour after we left. He was really traumatized. And I was like, I can't be traumatized. I have to focus. I have to focus. We went 40 miles away to our daughter's rental. We had the keys, it was fully furnished, and I knew it was vacant. And I was like, I was very fortunate that I didn't have to go bebopping from Airbnbs to rentals. Some people in my community of 9,000 that over 9,000 that lost their homes are on their 15th or 16th move. Moving is stressful. And I'm so fortunate that I didn't have to deal with that stress. After the disaster, we had nothing to eat, but I had my stuff. Okay, so I have insulin and stuff. What do I do now? Uh, I guess we'll go to the store. And you get like just a total brain fog. The disaster brain filled up my brain. I had no capacity to think on how to manage my diabetes, much less work. So I went on disability because my professional brain isn't there. My diabetes brain is kind of there, but all I can say is thank God for the pump and the sensor because that's what's kept me alive. I couldn't remember how long. Oh, and all my paper, I had I'm in medical records. So, like Bridget, I have documentation up the kazoo. I have records back from when I got diagnosed in 1965. I have them on a shelf because I was in the process of organizing them, but I left them. Now I have no medical history. I contacted all my doctors. Can you send me my medical history? Can you send me this? I'm like, give me this, give me this. I'm telling family and friends, send stuff back to me because all of a sudden I've been in documentation since 1977 and I had nothing. And so I felt naked. Yeah, I had my diabetic supply. That was the least of my worries. I had no documentation. So I had forgotten how long I waited between the time I took insulin to the time I eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Now I remember I used to wait 23 minutes from the time I ate breakfast, the time I gave my insulin till the time I ate breakfast. I waited 18 minutes for lunch and 10 minutes for dinner. That's how different my body is. And so I was like, okay, let's start. And because I was moving around and we were going to disaster centers and I'm digging through boxes just to get basic necessities, I just kept, my blood sugar just kept plummeting and plummeting. So I put it in sleep mode for 24 hours. I'm like, forget it. And so sleep mode has been my savior because it doesn't allow me to go low. Sometimes it doesn't let me correct, but I self-correct. But as far as going low, sometimes it makes me go low, or my body makes me go low. So I've had to change my basal rates. And I started with 15 minutes, the textbook, 15 minutes, plummet, 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 right after I eat. Okay, let's go down. So now I wait 10, 10, 10, which is markedly different than what I did before the fire. I'm in sleep mode right now because when I started this, I was 74. I'm like, oh, great, And so, like with stress, I'll go down instead of up. And it's really crazy, but that's just my brittleness and stuff. So, right now, I'm on sleep mode. I have a glucose in me. Let's see, I am 107. So, I'm okay now, but I've had to radically change my diabetes. I have two big groups that I'm a part of, and they did disaster collections for diabetics. And so I was able to get some other supplies. I was able to get glucagon. I was able to get glucose tabs, a couple boxes of sensors, and a couple of, because I use T-Slim. And I was able to get their T-Slim supplies because most people use the plastic cannulas. I have allergies to all that plastic stuff. In 1983, when I went on a pump, I had a metal needle. I'm like, I'll use a needle. I don't care. That's worked the best for me. I don't have any skin issues with the needle, with a metal needle. With the plastic, I had them constantly. So I, had acquired some plastic ones. I would give them to others in exchange for the T-Slim metal needle and that kind of thing. So because I have found type 1 adults that actually have lived a long time, I've been able to, groups, I've been able to get supplies for them. And some people have changed pumps to like the Omnipod. So I was able to get all their T-Slim supplies and stuff. So that's how I've kind of gotten more supplies. My current insurance does not pay for the T-Slim pump. It wants me to change to Mobi. Because I'm older, I'm like, my phone will die. I'll use it too much. I'll like forget to charge it. And it's like the pump has no screen. Oh no, I need a screen. So I've made the decision to stay with T-Slim and just kind of get pump supplies where I can because my insurance won't pay for it. I'll be 70 next year, and I just kept working because it was my built-in brain game. So I didn't have to worry about that, But I think I'm going to have to make the hard decision to finally retire. And the Medicare and all that scares me to death. I really never thought I would live this long. I never really thought I would have this kind of stress. But here I am, and I'll just have to deal with it. I am a strong self-patient advocate and advocate for others. I know nobody in my family has had diabetes, type 1 or 2, type 1, for 40 years. And then my niece, who happens to live upstairs from where I've been displaced, is also type 1. And she's had type 1 for 20 years. So collectively, we've got 80 years of type 1 in this unit here. And we've exchanged stuff too. So I know I can kind of depend on her. So I've had it 60 years. I'm tired of messing around with people. I have to advocate for myself. And I have taught nurses on insulin therapy and pumping when I was physically in a hospital, but now I work from home. And so I don't have that luxury of keeping them informed. And I also get In my records, I always look at the records. I always look at the follow-up sheet. And you wouldn't believe how many times they've written type 2. And then they tell me it doesn't matter. I'm like, oh, no, 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 stop. I've been in healthcare for 40 years, and I know if you stop my insulin and put me on pills, it won't do very good. And I don't let them take care of my diabetes because they don't understand that you can have somebody that takes a whole 14 units a day. So if I eat a big meal, I eat 2 meals a day, that's 14 units. If I eat 3 meals a day, it's 18 units. But that's very low for a full grown body to have, you know. So, yes, be an advocate for yourself and be prepared. Every single person I've talked to in the fire disaster has said we were going to be gone a couple days. In disaster preparedness, they never tell you plan on never coming back. If I had had that piece of information in my mind, I would have been prepared. The last thing I did was grab my dog and my insulin and went in the car. So because I had planned, and I was not a planner, my mom taught me take one shot a day and forget I have diabetes. I did that for 21 years. I'm surprised I'm still alive today because of it, but guess what? I am with complications, but you know, they're manageable. I don't have deteriorating complications. Um, and when a doctor tells me something to do, like you really have to stop bike riding because the jarring on the road is making your eyes bleed. I stopped that right before COVID, and I haven't had to have an injection since. So I have to knock on wood on that one. My kidney function has been stable as I have CKD. My kidney function has been stable for 35 years. So I just have old people kidney disease. I don't have diabetic kidney disease where the GFR trends down. And because I'm in medical records, I know the ranges and the GFRs and all the different ranges. That's how me as just a liaison, a patient knows all that stuff because I've been in healthcare and read the documentation. So be prepared and be an advocate.
Thank you so much for sharing that, not only your experience with the fires, but also your experience with complications and in medical records and having to correct things. And you've been through so much, and I'm so sorry. And it's really inspiring, honestly, to hear that you are now volunteering for other people, with diabetes who have lost things in the fire too. Um, as we mentioned right before we jumped on this call, like you seem to have bounced back really quickly. I know that you don't perceive it that way, but it looks like that to the onlooker, and I really admire that. So thank you so much for sharing your story.
It comes in waves.
I imagine, yeah. Two quick questions before we end the call. So one question is hopefully to try to lighten lighten the atmosphere a bit. Not every tricky situation with diabetes is a disaster or an emergency, although we have experienced those. Have you ever had a moment that wasn't catastrophic, but still required you to improvise or lean on someone else unexpectedly? What did you learn from it, if so, and how did you get through it?
I have one that I talked about just a little bit earlier. So last year when I was walking around on all these broken bones, I mentioned my dear friend Julie, who also has type 1 and works in the diabetes space. She and I, after the American Diabetes Association scientific sessions in Orlando last year, we needed a day to chill. So we went to Universal Studios. She's a Ravenclaw, I'm a Slytherin. So this made a lot of sense that we hung out there together. We had an awesome time, and in the late morning, we went on the Velocicoaster, which is like the coolest roller coaster I've ever been on. I highly recommend it if you like thrill rides. I keep my pump in my bra, which is well padded, and Julie keeps hers on her hip. We both have the T-Slim, tandem T-Slim pump. We got off that ride and were so dizzied by like how intense and incredible it was that I wasn't really paying attention, and she finally looked down. She goes, "Oh my God." And the face of her pump had shattered from the ride. So the way that you get thrown around it thrown around on it so much, shattered it to where it was unusable. So this is the beginning of our day, which was not cheap, by the way. And we were like, what do we do? Do we go back? Do we find first aid? Do we look for do we draw from our cartridge with a syringe? Neither of us had a syringe on us. She's far better prepared than I and had a backup travel pump in her hotel room, but we still wanted to avoid that. So we realized that we were both wearing the same infusion set. And what we did was we took her out, we calculated her hourly basal rate, and we would bolus her basal rate from my pump using my tubing in her infusion set. And then she would carb count and bolus when we ate through for the entire day. So between the two of us, we only had like 25% functioning pancreases at the time. And we say that we had like two hearts, one pancreas. So shout out to Julie out there who shared my pancreas with me. I would do it for any of you, but I'm so glad that it was you, Julie. So you have to innovate. We're put in these places where your life doesn't stop. Your universal day doesn't stop, and you're not getting that money back once you fork it over, I'll tell you that much. So we had to be in this position to like come up with our own solution, and we did, and we had a great time, and we have an awesome story to share.
I've heard that story several times and it's funny to me every time. That also goes to show that maybe everyone should have more friends who also have diabetes.
True.
Comes in handy. Any other thing that you guys want to jump in, Bridget or Dorothy?
I can't
I,
think of anything. Maybe Dorothy.
I can second the friends thing. In Southern California, we have Camp Conrad Chinnock, and I volunteered to clean that up. I didn't this year, we just didn't have the capability to figure all that out and go camping. By the way, my camp friends bought me sleeping beds, tents, Coleman stove, everything to replace my camping experience, in addition to the diabetic supplies. Every August, after the kids' sessions, we have a type 1 diabetic camp for adults. And I was thrilled. I'm like, my mom made me be normal. I couldn't go to diabetic camp. Wow, I get to go to diabetic camp as an adult. And so I've been going for 7, 8 years. And one time I went to camp and I was on Medtronic in the time you had that little blue charger thing. I had forgotten that. Well, thank God for camp people and all these people that have, like 50 or 100 people that have type 1. Because I'm like, who's on Medtronic? Can I borrow this to charge my claw? I forgot what all those are called, but my claw, I had to put it in the blue thing. And so I was able to do that. We've also shared supplies, we've shared insulin, and so we've watched out for each other. Right now, for 6 months, I've had a diabetic upstairs that I can do it, but she leans on me more than I lean on her because she's younger and trying to get it. But one of the things with camp is I know that most of them are 80s kids, and I'm a 60s kid. And so I'm a lot older than they are, and they really look up to me. And people that have a child with diabetes, I don't think it, I just live it. It's a part of me. I don't put it on anybody else. It's me. And so I have been told numerous times on what a role model I am. And I'm like, me? Me? I'm just a human being living with diabetes. Okay, whatever. And I'm not into the labels, but they are fundraising now for me to go back to camp this August because I am such a role model for all those other younger diabetics, But
Cool.
other than that, I just make sure I have the supplies because I don't have any other type 1s close enough to me, before the fire, to lean on.
Dorothy, I want to come to your adult with type 1 camp. And also, as a camp person, a fellow camp person, camp is the best.
Okay.
That's
I'll
true.
invite myself, no problem.
Okay.
Yeah, Dorothy, you really are an inspiration. I feel like that too. Dorothy and I met at another social event in the Southern California area, and I will say that I shared that sentiment as well.
Yes.
I love it.
Last question, very quickly. If each of you could give one piece of advice to someone with diabetes who find themselves in a sudden or unpredictable situation, either medical or environmental, and either big or small, what would it be?
I'll start because there are a couple things I want to touch on very quickly. But they fall under the same umbrella, which is know your rights or understand that you have them. Um,
Mm,
Particularly now, whether we like it or not, we live in a political environment where people are speaking up and speaking out for the things that they believe in. In the event that you are detained, no matter the reason, no matter your indication as a person, you have rights. If you
mm,
calmly and clearly state that you have diabetes, that you have medical needs, I believe it's the 14th Amendment that protects your right to appropriate medical care in
mm,
any environment, especially when detained. Um, and also, if you find that you are the subject of like a search and seizure, the Fourth Amendment, I'm pretty sure about this, does not protect against consensual seizure. So you have to calmly and clearly state that you do not want your things seized, and then the conversation can continue from there. Reasonable accommodation should always be granted, and you have rights. That includes in the school setting, for accommodations for testing. It includes in the workplace. People that have come before us have fought really hard for all of these rights. And also understand that, especially in times of like disaster, if a state of emergency is declared in your state because of a fire, because of floods, because of hurricanes, that gives you certain protections and allowances with your health insurance. Whereas if you have to leave your insulin behind, but a state of emergency has been declared in almost every state, you are allowed an override so that you can go to the pharmacy either in preparation for that disaster or in the follow-up from that disaster, in the aftermath when the emergency is declared, to get those needs met, your medical needs met. And also always check with the manufacturers, not only of your supplies, but of your insulin and any of your meds as well. Know that you have rights, and also keep us on Quick Dial. Check out DPAC, check out Beyond Type 1. They have great resources. Check out Breakthrough T1D, American Diabetes Association, Children with Diabetes, TCOID, Diabetes Link, Diabetes Sisters. We could go on and on, but we are all here to help.
that's good, Aaron.
Thank you.
Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you so much. I'll add to that just a couple of things. That's really good information to know. People don't think about it in those perspectives, and it's really good, like you said, in the climate that we're in now, to understand that. One thing I do want to mention as a caveat to all of this is that I did kind of touch on it earlier, is your mental illness, the mental wellness in the midst of this journey, because I'm also an advocate for NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness. We sometimes forget how a whole lifestyle change, even though my sister had suffered with diabetes for so many years, having a kidney transplant, complications from a kidney transplant, the needs, her daily needs changed so drastically that we were so focused on keeping that kidney well and making sure her blood sugar was okay that we somehow forgot about her mental well-being. So
Mm.
as an advocate, I encourage each of you, family members, friends, to, as much as you're checking on their blood sugar, their supplies, their emergency plan, their wellness, make sure that you're checking on their mental health, because if that goes down or if they go into a psychotic episode because of the stress of navigating such a hard thing, you're in a tough position. And now with all of the cutbacks that we're facing and potentially facing, mental health is at the bottom of the list. And you not only have a patient that's suffering with complications from diabetes, now you're complicating it even more with the complications from a mental psychotic breakdown. So check on your family members and friends and yourself, as a matter of fact, to make sure that your mental wellness is good. And like Dorothy said, because she's been in medical records for so many years, there's so much paperwork. You said, Dorothy, as you were leaving out of your house, you were not even thinking about your diabetic supplies. You were thinking about your documentation. And I would urge each person to, there's a healthcare proxy, and that involves paperwork. But I would beg each person to make sure that they have a healthcare ally, someone who will be there with you at the doctor's office, on the phone at the doctor's offices, at the emergency room, documenting, making notes so that they can be there and know exactly what's happening. Because as I know, mistakes happen all the time in healthcare, and you have to have someone present, because the person with diabetes will not be coherent, maybe, to even be able to recall that this was incorrect information. So having a person there assigned as your healthcare ally, and that documentation, along with checking on their mental illness, would be my strong suggestion.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I think a lot of us who have diabetes go about everyday life without really wanting to confide in anyone or wanting to fully explain things to anyone, but this goes to show that it actually is necessary sometimes to have someone at least who knows everything about how to take care of you, even if you don't want them to do it every day, so that in emergency situations that they can be the person that you rely on. Dorothy, do you have anything quick you wanted to add before we wrap up?
Yeah, one of the things is, Bridget, I didn't think of my paper documentation until after I lost it, not during the time. During the time, I did think of my diabetic supplies that were packed up and ready to go, not the emergency stuff, just basic everyday stuff. And I'm very blonde, so I'm not worried about being detained by ICE. I don't do anything that would put me in peril. But my husband is a very dark-skinned Latino, and I am scared to death for him and his family. We are doing the avoidance issue. I figure if I am the blonde in the car, that they won't stop us. Whereas if he's with other Latinos in the car, he may get stopped. And like right now, he goes 40 miles to visit his mom where ice is heavy. And I tell you, they grab you because there is a quota of 3,000 people a day. And by the way, they're calling them bodies. And it's on recorded that that's happening. And that area that his mother lives in is very heavily ice infiltrated, as well as the dressing like a construction worker with dirt on the face and that kind of thing. Where we volunteer every week up in Altadena, I showed up there last Wednesday. Him and I made the decision because it was so early on and we were trying to figure out this whole Gestapo type lifestyle that we decided not to go. ICE showed up. And the people who were renting it had everybody under a shade, which kind of blurred. They weren't out in the sun, so they were harder to identify. And they said, nobody walk away, nobody make any sudden moves. And all the Black people stared them down like, you are coming up on our property type of thing. And eventually they got nervous and they left. They were dressed as construction workers. They were in regular trucks and they had put black dirt on their face, but their clothes were clean. And that's how people identified them. So one of the things I've had to realize is if I go into detainment, I will probably die. Because I don't believe they're going to help me out when I need a pump change or that kind of thing. And if they try to give me insulin based on my weight, I'll go down and I won't have low supplies to take care of myself. So my husband and I have talked and said, and when ICE grabs you, they grab you. They don't, my husband is a US citizen, but they don't care. They won't ask for your ID. They grab and put you in the car. you end up in a detainment center, and they have arrested people for big mouths.
Wow.
I can have a big mouth when it comes to protecting people, and especially my husband and his family. And we've talked about this, and I said, you know what? Don't say a word. I can't say a word either. I just have to watch it unfold because I don't want to be arrested. And detained means you're arrested and stuck in an overcrowded facility with everybody else who doesn't have medical conditions. So, that's what we're facing with, and we've had those discussions about what would we do.
I'm so sorry, Timothy. It's been such a hard year.
That's my other disaster brain here. So now I've got fire, I've got diabetes, and I've got ice. Fire and ice.
Oh,
So I wish they'd just go away.
No
Fire
kidding.
and ice.
right.
Yeah,
There is
Wow.
just to reiterate, there's a great resource if you kind of Google protest rights or diabetes rights and detention. Beyond Type 1 in particular has some really, really great resources on their site.
Okay. Yeah.
Thanks, Aaron.
We get those on Facebook, we get those on Ring, we get them on Instagram, we get them on, but
Yeah.
Beyond Type 1 is good,
Yeah.
well, thank you all for joining this call today. I know it was a little bit like I feel my heart is heavy now after talking about everyone's difficult experiences and how hard diabetes can be sometimes. But it's also hopeful to know that all three of us, at least on this call, have, come to the end of our, overcome our struggles, and at least been well enough to be here on this call. So I really appreciate that. And it's kind of humbling. So thank you all for being here. And thank you for everyone who's tuning in. Yes, everyone is grateful in the Q&A too. So thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. And stay tuned for a new DPAC program next month, actually.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks,
Okay,
everybody.
Thank you
bye,
all.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye.